Hi, I'm George from Lost Coast Outfitters. We're out on the Klamath River today and we're trying out some new rods, and we're testing out different lines on them because every Spey rod likes a little bit different line. And so we spend a lot of time trying to focus on figuring out exactly what's the best line to balance for that rod. And it's really a confusing thing. So we wanted to take a moment and explain some of this to you. So when you're setting up a Spey rod, you have your first component, obviously a backing, just like any other reel, and then the backing is going to attach to a running line. And a running line is usually about 100 feet of level line, and it comes in two different forms. You have a monofilament style, which is like standard fishing line that looks like this, and then you have fly line style running line. And the main difference being that the monofilament style like this, it shoots through the guides much better, so you're going to get much better distance out of it. It's less friction. But the downside is when it's cold out, it can be a little bit hard to hang on to. And even the best casters will have the tendency to kind of whiff with this style running line, meaning it slips through your fingers. But it is great for maximum distance, dry fly fishing, and things like that. The fly line style running line, however, it's a little bit thicker. It tends to be a little stronger because it's got a braid on the inside of it, and a little bit thicker so that it's easier to hang on to, especially in cold conditions, or if you don't have a lot of dexterity, that's going to be a great line to go with. And then you're going to attach your head. And so shooting heads nowadays come in so many different configurations. So I want to create two big groups here. You have the Scandi group is the Scandi line has a lot of the weight towards the back of the line. You'll notice on a line profile, all the weight's in the back, and it anchors the direction that the line's going. And then it's a very long front taper. And what front tapers do, it's all about turnover and turning over long leaders, delicate presentation. So think of this as like a dry fly or a summer line. And then your other category is going to be Skagit lines. And Skagit lines, you'll see they're pretty uniform. You know, there's some weight in the back, but it's got a real short front taper, and it's designed to cast heavy flies, sink tips, anything with weight. So think of this more like an indicator line in the sense that it's designed to cast something really heavy on the front of the line. So let's talk a little bit more in depth about Scandi lines. So Scandi lines come in a lot of different lengths. The shorter Scandi lines, you can actually put tips on them. And so Rio makes versaleaders, and they have two different versaleaders. They have the Spey versaleader and they have the Scandi versaleader. The main difference between those two is that the Scandi versaleader is for Scandi heads 450 grains and lighter, and the Spey versaleader is for 450 grains and heavier. So I really recommend the 10 footers. Those are pretty much the only ones I use. I do like 12s and 15s, but they get quite cumbersome to cast. And so just make sure you get the Spey ones for your lighter weight ones, or excuse me, your Scandi versaleaders for your lighter weight heads, and your Spey versaleaders for your heavier weight heads. I'll show you what those look like here. So these are the versaleaders. They have a loop on one end of them, and then they go. They have a coating on top of them. They go down to 24-pound monofilament, and you tie a little loop on that. And what that'll do is it'll allow you to attach, a 3 or 4 foot section of tippet that you want to fish off the end of that. The longer Scandi heads, your call it 31, 35, 40 foot Scandi heads, they like just a really nice long leader on there. I usually fish, a 12 foot Rio steelhead leader on there, maybe 12 pound. And that's where I'm fishing dry flies and muddlers and grease lining and doing stuff like that. And that's how you're going to get your best, most delicate presentations. All right, so let's switch gears to the workhorse, the Skagit line. This is your winter line. This is when you're fishing heavier, larger profile flies. In the winter, the water gets colored up. You get a lot more flow, so we need to use heavier sink tips. We need to use heavier flies, and that's where the Skagit comes in handy. Now, you've probably been seeing Skagit lines come in a variety of different lengths, as short as 12, 13 and a half feet now, up to maybe 30 feet. I do find that the shorter Skagit heads, somewhere around 19-20 feet, are really good for beginners, really easy to cast. So you're loop to loop on your Skagit head onto your running line, and then you're going to loop on a mow tip or a straight section of heavy sink tip. And so talk about mow tips briefly. If you have a Skagit head that's under 450 grains, you probably want to use the mow lights. If you're between 450 and 550, you want to go with the mow mediums. And if you're 550 grains on up, you're going to be in the heavy and extra heavy category of mow tips. So on the end of your mow tip, what you're going to do is typically Rio does sell some 6-foot leaders that are kind of nice for turn-in flies over. More often than not, I'm fishing straight 12 or 15 pound tippet, maybe 4 to 6 feet. And the logic there is, if you're fishing a heavy fly and you want it to get deeper, nothing's going to sink faster than a well-designed heavy fly. That thing's going to go straight down. So if you fish it on a long leader, what you can do is, that fly is going to sink down further below your tip, but it's going to become harder to cast. If you have a lighter fly that you want your sink tip to cast, you want to keep a shorter leash so that the fly's not up here and your sink tip's down here, because you won't feel the grab. So you want to fish a shorter leader to keep it more on plane. I try to match the buoyancy of my tips with my flies as much as possible to keep everything swinging nice and in line, and you're going to feel your grab a lot better that way. So that's sort of a high-level overview on Spey lines. We can get much nerdier about this, but that is really kind of the high-level overview. So look forward to more videos more on Skagit lines, more on Scandi lines. We're really going to dive into this stuff and get a little bit more specific.